You ask me what my life is about. It is the life of a missionary monk founded on 3 principles: the imitation of the hidden life of Jesus of Nazareth, the adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, a life lived among the most forgotten people.
Charles de Foucauld was born a stone's throw from Strasbourg Cathedral on September 16, 1858. He was followed 3 years later by his sister Marie. They lost both their parents very suddenly within a few months.
3 months after the death of his mother, his grandmother died of a heart attack. He was then taken in by his maternal grandfather, Colonel Morley. It was his grandfather in particular, but also his teachers, who helped him to rebuild his life. His grandfather wanted him to follow a career in the army, and so he came to enter the military academy of Saint-Cyr. His grandfather died when he was 18 years old. This was devastating for him, but at the same time, he inherited a huge fortune. He organized big parties to distract himself from the boring army routine. He was an adventurer at heart. His boredom was relieved when a woman entered his life. He went to fight in Algeria, and that's where he discovered his true vocation as an explorer. He was always bold in his decision-making, and that's how he was driven to explore Morocco, which was at the time considered quite extraordinary. Seeing his faith, these souls living constantly in the presence of God gave me a glimpse of something greater and more real than my social occupations. He expressed his appreciation of Morocco by writing a book about the country. And this is what led him one morning to the church of St. Augustine in Paris to go to the confessional, where he knew that Father Huvelin would be hearing confessions. He went to see him and told him that he was looking for a teacher in religion. I think that he met an extraordinary father in Father Huvelin, a warm and welcoming paternal figure with so much wisdom that he could confide in him completely. Father Huvelin told him at this time, "Now you have made a confession of your whole life." And because he had been thinking all night, he hadn't eaten. In those days, one could only take communion on an empty stomach. Huvelin told him, "Go to communion." And so, his encounter with Christ was not a dramatic illumination. It was a routine daily encounter with a very simple priest in a church. As soon as I believed that God existed, I understood that I could not live in any other way than for Him. My religious vocation began at the same time as my faith. Father Huvelin made a request that had a big effect on these grandois' ideas. He asked him to go on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Among other destinations, he left for Nazareth, and in the winter, Nazareth is full of muddy roads. He asked himself how the Son of God-made man could have lived this life of such poverty, of nothing at all. That's how, little by little, he ended up with the Trappist order of Notre-Dame-de-Neige, because they are the poorest, and above all, they have a priory in Syria, which is very poor and dangerous as well, because there is persecution there. And he tells them, "You are not poor enough. I must found an order that is poorer than the Trappists." So he left them to found it, and he lived in Nazareth, literally living the life of a servant in Nazareth.
He lived here with us for 3.5 years, and he never knew the taste of anything but a piece of bread and water. Nazareth was poor. It was not the Nazareth of today. The children waited for him at the door to get a piece of bread. Brother Charles had a big heart. He led them to his hermitage, counted the children, and cut his piece of bread so everyone could have a piece.
One day, in a sermon, he heard that Jesus had so much taken the last place that no one could ever take it from him. And he, who also wanted to take the last place, realized, I will never be able to do this. And this made him think more deeply. He began to see that God is love, that Christ is a loving heart first and foremost, and so it was his extreme commitment that would lead him to understand the humanity of Christ.
He went to see the Mother Abbess and asked her, "Mother, I want to become a priest." And the abbess couldn't believe her ears, because on several occasions she had asked him to go to Jerusalem to see the Latin patriarch, to ask him to be ordained. And each time he had answered, "I'm unworthy, unworthy."
He wanted to become a priest because he saw that in the Holy Land one could only found an order if one was a priest. During his retreat, preparing him for the diaconate and the priesthood, he was awestruck by the stories of the lost sheep and the Eucharistic banquet. The poorest who were living in the gutter must be called and led to the Master's banquet. Straight away, he dropped the idea of the Holy Land and said, I will go to live near Morocco, and when a priest is allowed to enter, I shall do so. I can see that Muslims have slaves of their own, so I will found a community of slaves, like the Christian community. And this is what he attempted to do. Like those who are led by the Holy Spirit, he allowed himself to be led by circumstances. He could see that he was confined at Ben Abbas, confined by the garrison, where there were good Christians who came to serve at Mass, officers as well as soldiers, good men from Brittany. A friend from his youth, Laperin, that's his name, was to become a captain, then a major, then a colonel of the Saharan oases. Laperin told him, over there in the Hoggar mountains, there is no one, not a single priest, no Eucharist. If a priest could celebrate the Eucharist there. On hearing this, de Foucauld didn't hesitate for one instant and set off to go as far away as possible, thousands and thousands of kilometers across the desert. He believed that small farmers are needed in the Hoggar region, small Christian traders, priests as well, but incognito priests, that is to say, scientific priests who carry out scientific work, but priests at the same time, close to the surrounding population. What attracted me was a life following in the footsteps of Jesus according to the gospel and nothing else. Then I became attracted by the people of the desert more than the desert itself. The people of the desert and those with another culture. And for me, getting used to another culture was an essential part of my religious life, because this implied an asceticism, a complete change of outlook, and a hospitable attitude towards others. In my opinion, this is the love of God for all men. This is at the heart of Charles de Foucault's spirituality. This all-encompassing love, love for every man and woman, whoever they may be.
I'd like to tell the story of Aisha, a mother who had 3 children, 2 of which were disabled. 14 and 3 years old, with a serious psychomotor disability. We'd been trying to find some doctors who could improve the lives of these children for several months. This very determined mother had finally obtained a small, light and practical wheelchair for her 14-year-old eldest child. Together, we put the 14-year-old child in the wheelchair, and for the first time, this fearful child put his hands on the wheels and realized he could move forward. It was like a child walking for the first time, and it was truly wonderful. My greatest joy is the relationships that I can have as a sister or mother sometimes as I grow older. I'm sometimes called mother by the younger women. These are the simple relationships of everyday life that can bring us such joy.
There were 50 households when he arrived at Tamaracet, so he got permanent houses built. He wanted so much to be close to the people that he made extraordinary efforts to learn Tamashek, the Tuareg language. Foucauld collected proverbs and poems to learn the language, and he put together a Tuareg French and French Tuareg dictionary. He was really fully integrated in the lives of the Tuareg people. Father, I give myself to you. Do with me as you will. Whatever you do with me, I will thank you. So long as your will is done in me and in all your creation, I am ready for anything. My God, I do not wish for anything else. The Eucharist is God among us and brings about the salvation of the world. Every day I experience this in the Eucharist. I bring everything that I am, all my wretchedness. Yesterday we were talking about the time in Charles de Foucauld's life when he was ill and how he realized that he was really nothing special. This is a fundamental part of my life. knowing that I am just a poor person, but in this poverty and in solidarity with all the other poor people around us, we are moving towards God. For me, this is what evangelization is all about, bringing the gospel and salvation to the world. We decided to go on a long trip, a honeymoon year in Jerusalem. And that's where we came across the little sisters of Jesus, both those who were on the Palestinian side in the old city of Jerusalem and those who were on the Israeli side. We were touched by their simple welcome and by their closeness to their neighbors.
We said to them, we'd like to live like you. And they replied, go ahead, start a community. We were young at the time, we didn't know anyone. We felt attracted to community life, these little groups, the closeness to the neighbors and others living nearby, like a family. We asked ourselves, could this be possible for us? They're all religious brothers and sisters. Is it possible that a couple could live like this? And then we read a letter from Brother Emmanuel de Grenay, which quoted Brother Charles. Priscilla and Aquila were a couple who lived with Paul and made tents. We need Priscillas and Aquilas. And then we thought, that's it. We found something.
Allô, Marie?
Someone would like to hear my testimony? The best gift that life and community brought me was the world of prayer that we had been bathed in since childhood, with strong family links which built us up. It was a real treasure that was given to us as children. I also have vivid memories of the brothers who passed through. They were on mission throughout the world. It was a wonderful window onto the world. So I'm proud of my parents who've made this commitment and renew it every year. It makes me happy to see them like that.
It was a hard year for the country. 17 months with no rain. It was a severe famine for a country which depends on milk more than anything, where the poor live almost exclusively on milk. The goats were as dry as the earth, and the people as dry as the goats. I was ill and had to stop working. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, I give you my soul. The Tuareg nomads of Tamaracet realized he was ill and understood that he needed milk. So they went to look for some goats, a round trip of 40 kilometers. By taking a little milk from each goat, they gave him some milk, and this is what saved him. It was the poor who saved him. He wanted to save them and do good to them, but it was they who did good to him. And this is where his idea of union began. This means priests and lay people coming to do this work of lone missionary, as he called it. When I'm in my garden each morning with the little brother of Jesus, we exchange everyday news. This is very important for me because it's the little brothers who are following in the steps of Charles de Foucauld. For me, they are the Charles de Foucauld living with us, in fellowship with our everyday lives, and this brings us closer to one another.
Jesus spent his life working as a carpenter in Nazareth. It was a simple life, ordinary, like anyone's. Besides, the more we climb up the ladder of promotion, the more advancement becomes harder and the more it has personal cost. We fight to move upwards. This type of competition doesn't interest me. What interests me is service. If I can serve where I am, I will do it to the best of my ability in simple things.
For me, having lived here and having heard the testimonies of both sides, Father Foucauld is a symbol of a man of God. His life is a very eloquent testimony that shows that Christians and Muslims here in Tamaracet can live their lives of faith together. Each of them looks at the other and is inspired by the other to live in a fellowship which lifts us all up.
On the 1st of December 1916, some Senazite activists were fighting for independence in the Sahara and had surrounded the small fort that Charles de Foucauld had built to protect the villagers. They succeeded in drawing him outside by announcing the arrival of the post. The arrival of 2 members of the Camel Corps made them angry. The young boy who was looking after Charles de Foucauld became afraid and fired. The bullet hit Foucauld and killed him straight away. The circumstances made it clear that he had been killed pointlessly, like so many anonymous victims of the 20th century, with its decades of wars and troubles.
When people come here, they say to us, "Excuse me, we don't want to get in the way of your solitude." But we say, "We aren't hermits." "Oh, so you're monks." "Not that either, I'm afraid." In fact, we meet lots of people passing through. Often there's no follow-up, but there are some very beautiful encounters. In the Muslim world, it's often difficult to go into a house, whereas here people come and open their hearts to us.
C'est la rencontre de l'islam qui a changé sa vie. Non, c'est important. Donc, tout de suite, il les a. Et quand on prend le thé avec eux, il y a un seul sujet, c'est la prière. Parce que ce que le bouleverse, c'est de trouver des chrétiens. Parce que c'est pas évident dans notre diocèse. Les Européens, ils te donnent d'argent.
Europeans giving you money, Algerians giving a mandarin orange or a cake. So there are some very good meetings. Life here is very simple, like a fraternity. We have prayer, and people think that we don't have anything to do here. But in fact, we never stop.
avec les gars d'école, avec la
With the men who work at the weather station next door, we are practically a family. As they don't know what to do during the day, they come and we have a cup of tea, speak in Arabic, and the message gets across.
C'est pas d'évangéliser, mais
The goal is not to evangelize, but gospel values are there. And I believe that the people around here like us very much. It's because we are close and accessible, as Charles de Foucauld would say. It's just friendship, and that's all. Where there are ties of friendship, we are blessed.
tu es comblé. Vous allez dans un campement, par exemple.
When we go to an encampment, for example, you can see the relationship with God because you see there's nothing false in those people, living in poverty as they do. And they're always cheerful. To be honest, in them we see God's poor. We who want to be little brothers, we understand there is much work to do when we see our neighbors.
Petit frère, on a du travail à faire, hein, quand ils voient nos voisins.
Ça me fait beaucoup de joie quand je vois, par exemple, en lisant
I
l'Évangile,
feel very joyful when I read the Gospels or the Bible to see that in this Muslim world of the Tuareg, there are elements of our own biblical culture.
de notre culture biblique. Pas mal des éléments qui sont communs.
We have quite a few common points. And for me, it's always a surprise that the Bible and the Gospels came from a world that was nomadic, or Arab, or Jewish.
Conçu dans le monde nomade, ou arabe, ou sémite.
And that moves me, for example, when I read the Psalms in the morning. I find there's a lot of in them that's like this world.
Pas mal des éléments de ce monde d'ici.
You know that our basic prayer is adoration, then Lauds, Vespers, the offices in community. But each person has to find their own rhythm.
La nuit même où il fit livrer, il prit les pains. En te rendant grâce, il les bénit, il les rompit et les donna à ses disciples en disant: Prenez et mangez-en tous. Ceci est mon corps livré pour vous.
For Foucauld, the common ground was baptism. He called on all those who are baptized, as he said, priests as well as the laity, to put their baptism into practice. This means being a missionary. Don't wait for orders from the Pope. With the help of the Holy Spirit, you can develop your own personal discernment and you can become creative.
We will pray this month that being faithful to our baptism, we will know how to witness together to the Spirit of the risen Christ in our everyday lives, and how to be open to new opportunities. For the Word of God for this month, we suggest a verse from the Gospel, which just before his death, Charles de Foucauld said had been the word that had most touched and transformed him. It's in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 25, verse 40. Amen, I say to you, whatever you did for one of these least brothers of mine, you did for me.